Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Claims Theory podcast. I'm your host, Lindsay Gross, and today we're diving into a topic that's very timely, tech-enabled transformation in healthcare with a special focus on optimization of the Epic platform and what comes next. Joining me today is a great guest, Chris Blackerby, co-founder and CEO of Incisive Consultants, an award-winning and fast-growing healthcare IT consulting firm. Chris and his team help large health systems optimize Epic and navigate their digital health journeys. Chris, thank you so much for being here.
Lindsay, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to dig into this. I think before we do dig in, I think our listeners would love to hear just a little bit more about your journey, your background, and what ultimately led you to founding Incisive Consultants.
Sure. Well, the journey started around 2010, actually, with some fellow Mizzou alum graduated, and a few of them worked at Epic Systems. And we were in that mode, fearless and thinking about what's next in our journey. It was an optimal time because it was mandated that health systems get an electronic health record software by a certain date. And Epic was quickly enough, they were leading the charge in the space. So took a risk with that group of individuals, and we decided to start a consulting firm, really closely after I graduated. Bootstrapped that and essentially led it over 5 years to grow to roughly 300 employees, a little over 300 employees. And then we actually sold that to Accenture. Because Accenture, a big management consulting company, they wanted to dive into Epic consulting. They saw the value, they saw the relevancy there, wanted to really tackle that. They had already obviously worked with a lot of healthcare clients, wanted to add that to the. So sold to Accenture, and we ran their Epic consulting practice for quite some time until we decided to branch away and get back to our roots where we can work with health systems at very, very flexible rates and, get back to having a smaller, tight-knit group that can, focus on customization. And that's where Incisive was born in 2019.
That is brilliant, by the way. So kudos to you and your other founders, really paying attention to the industry, the market, the need for something exactly like that. And then just doubling down on the Epic platform. It's brilliant. So let's talk more about that. Many health systems have invested heavily in Epic. They've done their go live, they've implemented modules. What are you seeing today in large health systems in terms of where they're stuck, where they haven't yet tapped the full value of their Epic investment?
One area would be just, underutilizing the functionality. So once you have Epic, which is typically installed, quite well, the tech is substantial and it's capable. I'd say that, many health systems are not using it to its full potential, right? That the powerful engine that is only operating at half speed. So once you go live, there's a necessity to optimize. Another stuck point would be, the fragmented build. Over time, if you are piecing build together year over year, if you're taking each department live at different points, eventually some of that build is going to be dated. So it's going to create inconsistency. So we'll need to optimize up to bridge those gaps. And lastly, big problem that we face, the bridge between IT and operations. Many of our projects, we see face that problem. Just IT owning the system and operations really owning the performance and essentially creating that accountability to ensure that it's working really well.
Yeah. So, and thank you. So over 50% of health systems are using Epic today. And so just to kind of recap what you said, modules are underutilized, data is siloed, ROI is lagging. So health systems look to consultants just like Incisive Consultants to come in and really help make sure that this very large investment they did yields exactly what they expect it to, and that the operators and the tech team are trying to speak the same language. So what are the tangible implications of not optimizing? We kind of just talked about that, in terms of people, process, and technology, and aligning all of those things. What are the tangible implications of not optimizing?
Sure. So tangible implications of not optimizing. One would be the processes are just unclear. We see something very relevant right now happening with many health systems that want to grow. They're adding, facilities. They're merging and they're acquiring new health systems in order to grow and sort of, tackle more market share. And as these new facilities, for example, are being put on their instance of Epic, we're seeing legacy processes and old habits transition over to new facilities, new healthcare organizations. It points to the necessity to optimize, but it's clear that the lack of process clarity is there. One of our projects, for example, that we recently with a large health system on the West Coast, post-acquisition, there was an Epic integration that they were aiming for. They wanted to acquire a smaller medical center. And just as we assessed their workflows, there were so many gaps, so many inconsistencies, and we're now taking that, putting it into this new facility, right? So it's apparent that we need to optimize, right? So we were able to successfully get them live, expedited the go live, but, with that assessment knew that it was going to come with optimization and customization. I'd say something else that's apparent would be, your technology just it's not configured properly for what you're capable of or what your current state is. Epic, there's a reason why Epic comes out with new upgrades. Often, it needs to speak to new system functionality. And again, it's the legacy habit with what's current state. So, there's new modules that roll out during Epic UGM meetings every year. You hear about the new tools that Epic's introducing and wants you to lean into, new tech integration, all those things. So if your tech is apparently outdated, we need to upgrade it. We need to optimize it and integrate it with third-party tech. Lastly, I'd say just the adoption of workflow. One gap that we fill and that we see often enough is just your staff isn't adopting new workflows well. The efforts to bridge those gaps would be training and, training properly, having a physician champion to help, bridge the gap between the physician adoption with this new technology and just a buy-in.
Yeah, and that makes total sense. And then the added layer of the complexity of those legacy systems. Mm-hmm. And teams having their own process and workflow. And so then having to get them up to speed on all things Epic and getting, again, operations and tech and everyone on the same team, helping to bridge the gap between the technology, the process side of things, and try to get everyone running effortlessly, if that's even possible, right? But so Epic generates a tremendous amount of data, clinical, operational, financial. One of the hardest pieces is converting that data into actionable insight that drives performance. How do you guide organizations leveraging Epic data to drive better outcomes?
Sure. Well, we start with helping them map what a real workflow is going to look like, particular to their environment, versus what Epic provides as a playbook. The playbook that is provided, it's a good guide point, but then you get into the real world workflow, what is unique to their own instance. So we want to map that out properly. Again, the IT and operation, bridge, we want to make sure that it's governed properly and it's cohesive so that people know who owns what, where the responsibilities lie. And again, it's not very fluid. So we can come in and help rebuild that governing structure and ensure that there's a joint ownership responsibility breakdown between IT and operations. Training is another bridge. We train staff to use their data better. So how do you use the data? How are you, using dashboards? Once they're there, we set better targets and essentially reinforce that accountability that needs to happen from operations. And then Epic is not one-time install and you set it, forget it, right? It is a living ecosystem that requires ongoing maintenance and ongoing optimization. So it's helping staff and leaders understand that and rethink how they are, just viewing this system.
Yeah, so always staying up to date and in the know with everything that Epic continues to enhance and evolve. And you mentioned your team also provides training. So what does that look like? Do you go in and do an assessment of certain modules, and then you figure out where those gaps are so that you can apply the training?
There are times when they know what they need and they
Yeah.
call on us to just provide that.
Yeah.
But oftentimes enough, yeah, there's an assessment. We do a lot of rev cycle assessments. We do a lot of training environment assessments. And when we're brought on early enough, which is advised, we get to help to actually build the roadmap, which would include training and transfer of knowledge. But every project that we take on, it is going to require a transfer of knowledge. But yes, we would assess. We have trainers that are, that used to work at Epic. The primary base of our entire staff used to work at Epic. So best of the best there.
Wonderful. Yeah. Can you share maybe a specific example or case where you saw a health system go from reactive to proactive using Epic-based data to forecast, to intervene earlier, kind of all of the things that you just mentioned, and move the needle in a measurable way?
There are so many examples because it's enabling these health systems to innovate. Almost every project now that we take on is going to support this, but it's a competitive environment. Again, we're looking at more mergers and acquisitions than ever before, right? We're seeing the growth become a primary priority. But one of the larger health systems in the South that we work with aims to be a leader in innovation. So we work with them. We've worked with them on a number of different projects around AI, and this was even a few years ago, to help automate things. When this is before Epic's 2025 user group meeting that talked about going from assistance to automation as their message, and all the tools that are coming out to help, the kits that are coming out to help with automation. They were on the forefront of that. So we helped with automating note taking and implementing AI tools to help essentially save time that's spent in the system, so physicians don't have to spend as much time taking these notes physically, and gives you more time with the patient experience is optimized, and essentially your patients are happy, so they're going to continue to come back to your organization. We're taking that data and trying to apply it to future state innovation with that organization. But we see that across many different projects that we're tackling current state.
Yeah, and that's really exciting too, being on the forefront. And so speaking of, are the organizations you're working with, are they using Epic as the platform of record, or is it still a hub that needs considerable augmentation?
I believe that I'm going to blend both of those. I believe that it is a platform of record, but I also think that this next wave of automation and AI, I think, is going to be layered on top of that platform. All the digital tools that are coming out, I think that they're going to require augmentation. So it's going to keep Incisive relevant, and I think that it will still remain this platform of record, and we're gonna shift from an Epic-centric environment to an Epic Plus sort of ecosystem where Epic has to coexist with new growing technology and not sort of remain a closed environment. We've already seen that happen, but I think more so than ever, the future state is Epic Plus.
Yeah, and that's interesting. So just all things, assisting and continuing to drive very meaningful progress forward, and more efficiency being gained. So what advice, Chris, do you have for healthcare leaders who are looking ahead to the next 3 to 5 years? How should they be thinking about investing in technology now so that when the next wave hits, they're prepared and ideally ahead of the curve?
Yeah. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is advice from Epic, which is there are so many tools coming out and they're shiny and they're effective. They're going to help you realize a higher ROI. They're expensive and they're time consuming to implement. So I would say the first bit of advice is just stabilize your foundation of Epic. It's the, do more with what you have mentality and then start to layer on. I would advise to, I would advise to lean into automation, right? To lean into the automation of repetitive work and adopt some of the tools that are easier to implement, a little more fluid, and then, essentially prepare your system now to get ready for scaling with AI. Right. So, but that stabilization is huge. You don't want to start building on a cracked foundation. But I
Right.
would suggest you believe in, automation and you believe in interoperability and prepare your foundation to actually add those layers.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, speaking of scale, transformation doesn't happen without leadership buy-in, as you mentioned earlier on, and a culture aligned for change. So from your work with clients, what are the leadership behaviors or organizational mindsets that separate the successful transformations from the ones that fail?
So leaders typically, if they are successful, I've noticed that they make the reasoning, the why we're doing this, very clear to the staff. Oftentimes there is a gap between why and the actual implementation. So why are we doing this? So to better understand this, that's clear. Information's transparent, even uncomfortable parts about what's happening and how it's going to affect things. All things are on the surface. It's clear and it's transparent. I see successful leaders, they believe in accountability and in ownership. I think that point is huge. You have a system, you have data, but how do you use the data and who's going to be accountable for using that data properly? It's too expensive to not do that. It's too expensive and it's too robust and it needs too much, oversight and involvement to not optimize with accountability. I'd say also just empowering, a team to just structure your governance properly and again bridge the IT and operations gap. Right, a good leader who's going to see success in their projects really understands that need and is proactive about it, and they lean into augmentation. To ensure that their projects are done quickly, and efficiently and essentially successfully. I think you need to lean into augmentation as experts coming in to help because current staff just might not be as capable. Again, with speed in mind.
Right. Yeah, and I think to all of the points you just made, leadership is about communication, making sure your teams are aligned and the entire team can rally and be excited and embrace the change and not be afraid of it. I know a lot of, these big implementations can really scare the staff away from being present in setting up those workflows, setting up those modules appropriately, and really getting that buy-in from the top to the bottom to the top. So no, everything you just said makes perfect sense. And so given the pace of change, especially in healthcare, what can leaders do to make sure their team doesn't burn out, especially when it comes to these massive epic implementations, and to make sure that change sticks and they don't just go back to the old way after that transformation is either, declared done, or, how do you keep the teams from burning out?
Well, I think you first involve them in the design, right? You have phases of implementation, and I think you co-design with your team, with your staff, not thinking, on behalf of my staff, but with the staff, so that they feel that this change is actually collaborative. It's something we implement here, even in Incisive. We're not just speaking to change and say, look what we've done, but we include everyone in that change so that they feel that they were part of that transition and they understand the why. We also celebrate small wins in an effort to build momentum. And I suggest that, leaders at healthcare organizations do the same. You celebrate the small wins. The projects are lengthy. Installs they're time consuming, and it can span over months to years. So you need to set these small goals, reaching the higher mountaintops, of course, but small baby steps and celebrating those incremental wins. And then it's about adopting and managing the shift, managing the change. So reinforcing these new behaviors and, set new incentives. And again, you set new training marks, but you help adopt the change in an effort to shift from a short-term to a long-term mindset where that change isn't stopping at go live, but instead it's becoming a part of your new operational process to maintain the system, to optimize it, again, to look at it like a breathing mechanism.
Yeah. Keeping your team engaged. And I love that, making sure that everyone feels like they are a part of it. And making it fun. Have fun at work while you're working really hard. But yeah, that's
Exactly.
great advice. And I really appreciate that, especially coming from someone like you, Chris, who, with everything that you've built in your career and now with Incisive Consultants, you really are speaking from experience. So it's good to hear. And I think, is there anything else you want our listeners to know about Incisive Consultants and the services that you all offer?
I think that we're very excited on what's happening in the environment, with Epic and with healthcare IT. We are so aligned with this emerging technology and leaning into AI. We're using it across the board. So I am just looking forward to what's to come in the next few years. And I appreciate you and your platform. I think it's fantastic to, partner with like minds and really try to, optimize and collaborate so that we can really help essentially, hospitals and patient care, right? So it really matters, and I'm excited about what we're doing.
Absolutely. And it always goes back to the patient, and the patient feels when these transformations really take root and take place. Their bills are accurate, they're timely. There's less surprise there. So all of these builds, all of these implementations, and training, they are felt by the patient community when they go well and when they don't. But, Chris, if anyone out there is looking for, Epic experts to help them in their Epic implementations, and or you already have Epic and you need a revamp, you need someone to come in and assess where you are, provide training, reach out to Chris and Incisive Consultants. It's just been such a valuable conversation, Chris. If there's one piece of practical advice that you would give to a leader right now, someone who is, maybe not realizing the full value of the Epic system, what would you tell them to focus on this quarter?
I would tell them to focus on doing more with what they have, and that what's the train isn't stopping. There are a lot of tools to utilize. Epic provides those. There are a lot of experts who can help you as a health system implement that emerging technology, but it won't. Essentially, it'll compile issues and compile inconsistencies if you don't ensure your foundation is set well. So set that well. That's my advice. And then, again, open your eyes up to what's happening. The train's not stopping, and we are aiming to automate and essentially add more efficiencies.
Yeah, good advice. It always comes down to the foundation. So I love that. And Chris, thank you again for your time and your insight. You've given the listeners a lot of tangible ideas and strategic perspective around tech-enabled transformation as it relates to building out the Epic platform and then positioning for what's next. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining and listening or watching, however you choose to digest your podcast. Be sure to subscribe, share, and stay tuned for our next episode. Thanks, everybody.